All right. Well, hello. Thanks everybody for hopping on here. I'm just going to make sure that we are live because we are streaming to the Facebook group, and then we also have a watch page. So yeah, looks like we are good. So perfect. Okay, cool. Well, super excited for this challenge. Yeah, it's finally here. So the Massive Impact Challenge. So welcome. It's going to be a ton of fun, and we're really lucky today to have an amazing guest. Before I get into that and what we're going to be talking about, just wanted to give a quick overview of this challenge. So what is the whole point of the Massive Impact Challenge? And so really, when I first thought about putting this on is I just thought about how there's a lot of people that really care about making an impact in the world, and a lot of I truly believe that when you make an impact, that the income follows as well. There's kind of like two camps out there. It's like some people that really just want to focus on money. It's like, I'm just going to get to $1 million a year and then 10 million, like all that type of stuff. But there's also a lot of people that just really care about making a difference in the world, and the money they know will just follow as they make an impact. And so that's really the whole point of this is, how do we make an impact in the world on a bigger scale? So not just like on one-to-one, because that's great, but then how do we branch out? How do we do that on a bigger scale? And so that's what the whole point of this challenge is. And so it's awesome to have you here. One of the things that I wanted to talk about really quickly is, this is a challenge. So you'll be expected to do some homework and to think a little bit about yourself, about like, how do you want to do this? And really the goal for each day and just for the entire challenge is for you to, first of all, just feel empowered. I really want you to feel like, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can continue to do, maybe you do workshops, maybe you do challenges or whatever that is. You can continue to do that and find some things here that you can do going forward that'll make a big difference. Or maybe you just want to pick one of these things that you feel like, okay, this is what I want to focus on and do, so that by the end of the challenge, you're like, okay, I'm ready to get going with this and to really make a difference. And so that's really a lot of the goal here. And so again, it is a challenge. And so one of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to go all in. So one of the things that I read a book from Dr. Ben Hardy, and he talks about how it's easier to be 100% committed than to be 98% committed. And so I think that's really powerful, because if you think about, okay, like I'm going to go off of sugar or something like that for a year, it's going to be a lot easier for me to say, okay, I'm 100% in, because I can decide right now that like, that's what I'm doing and I'm going to be done with that. Right. Because otherwise, if it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have it sometime, then every time something comes up, I have to rethink about that. And like, okay, actually, is this the time where I want to do it or not? I'm not totally sure. Whereas when you decide 100%, then it's like, no, I'm all in, and I can do this right now. And so that's what's really powerful with that. And so something I just want each of you to put in the chat. I want you to write down, hey, yes, I'm all in. I'm all in on this challenge because I know that that's, a big deal, and then that's going to make a big difference. And so I encourage you to do that. And then just really try to make sure we have the chat up here too, so I can see any comments. So bear with me for a second while this pulls up. And so, yeah, write in the chat, hey, I'm all in. And then we'll get started in a sec. And so as far as, I mentioned that, that this is a challenge, that there is a workbook. And so you should have that already in the emails, you'll be getting that. And so go ahead and make sure you get that figured out, because every day you'll be asked some questions that you can go through. And as far as doing your homework, there is the PDF, so you can just like type that out and go ahead and like, if you want to digitally, if you want to print it out or whatever that is, you can do that. But also make sure you go, if you're in the Facebook group, to go and post in there and say, hey, either go live in the Facebook group or just post your homework, so that every day we know, hey, what's going on? And you may think, but like, why would I do that? But like, that's a way that you can really encourage other people as well, to say, hey guys, look, this is what I'm focusing on. And when you do that, other people will also open up and they'll be able to make that impact as well. And so anyways, that's really a lot of kind of some of the housekeeping for today, as far as what we wanted to jump on here and talk about. But yeah, other than that, I think we will get started. And so what we're just what we're going to be doing is each day we'll have different awesome speakers come on and be able to really talk through this and ask some awesome questions. And I really just hope, again, that you have you get a lot of value out of this, and that you feel like, okay, yes, I know how to make a massive impact. And so with that, I'm super excited to welcome to the stage Dr. Juan Michelle Martin. And so really excited to be able to learn about, her strategies on using workshops and how that's a really amazing way to provide value up front, to create massive engagement. And so, and especially how can you do that online too? I mean, now there's so many things online, and everything used to be just in person, but now, transitioning in that way, which is really cool. And so really excited to have you on. So Dr. Juan, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I think that this is absolutely amazing. And I think sometimes, we get into this rut of we do the same things, and sometimes you need to spice it up a little bit. And so, and recognize that there are other ways that we can, do things to kind of make an impact and reach the people that we want to serve and so on. So I think that this is amazing.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's great to have you here. And I'd love to have, just share briefly your story and how you got to where you're at today.
So I am a physical therapist. I have a clinical orthopedic background in physical therapy, and then I transitioned into pelvic health. I was one of those people. I was an athlete, high school, college, international, and I just knew I was going to work with athletes, right? The thing is, I got burnout. I was also an athletic trainer, and I used to travel with about 6 different teams while in grad school. And I got exhausted from the travel. I like the travel playing sports, but then I was like the travel of, working with the teams, it was a lot. But I wanted to still be in orthopedics, and that was the direction that I went. Loved working with people. And as immediately as I started working in orthopedics, I had, women's health clients. I had my pregnant and postpartum moms. I had other moms with other issues, At one point, I was working next to a trauma surgeon, and about 50% of the cases involved pelvic fractures, which was really incredible. And, I really felt like there was a missing component to these people's care, because when they would talk about the personal things, especially intimacy, it was kind of disregarded. And I'm like, there's got to be more to this. And so that was kind of when I set out on my quest to even dive deeper into women's health, not just pregnancy and postpartum, but to dive deeper. And then I opened my practice a few years ago, where I treat adults and children in pelvic health, and I see them both in person and online. And I started off seeing them online pretty much almost immediately. I used to do home visits, and I did virtual sessions because I had 2 toddlers. And I needed flexibility. And anybody that's a parent that has the kiddos knows you kind of got to be available if the school should call and say, hey, your kiddo has a fever, or hey, we have this event, because, they always tell you about the events, the week of in preschool. Like you don't get much advance notice. And it's never like early morning or late evening. It's like, yeah, it's at 10:30 in the morning. And so I really, really, I felt like that would be the best direction, to be able to see my clients virtually and see them in their homes, and felt like that would just give me, not only myself flexibility, but them for sure, because, now they can schedule even easier around their life and so on. But as I got deeper into the business and wanted to connect more with people, one of the things that I found to be really, really helpful was doing workshops. And I used to do them in person, but it's interesting, even before COVID, I started doing workshops online, because I was like, well, I'm already seeing people virtually. Why not? Right. And you recognize that, and maybe before COVID, a lot of people were not as much, like, oh, this is the thing, right? Like, maybe it was like out of convenience, and, oh, good, I don't have to drive anywhere, and I can do this. But what people started to recognize, I think, is you're getting the same value. You're getting the same content as if it were in person, with like multiple times the convenience, because now you can be at home, you might be at work, you might be in the car, right? But I really, really loved doing these workshops as a way of reaching audiences, as a way of connecting with people, and it has worked wonders.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, yeah, I'm excited that we can dive into that specifically. But yeah, I think you bring up some great points is the convenience. Cause like for you, it's convenient, right? Cause like with your kids and the schedule and everything like that. But even for everyone else, like I was remember in our last Pelvic Impact Summit, I was talking to Jessica Drummond and she talked about that too, of how like, well, it's actually great for our clients because now they don't have to drive 45 minutes or whatever. It's like they can just hop on and they're good to go. And so and I think we've learned that we can do so much virtually now, which is really, really cool. And so, yeah, I appreciate you bringing up your story and talking about that. And I'd love to, in the chat, everyone, write down like where you're calling in from today, and let us know a little bit about you too, so that we can get to know you. And especially, you can kind of talk about that through your homework too. So, yeah, let's dive into workshops, because I think that's a really powerful strategy that we can use. And so you briefly talked about why like you would do that, or I guess why you wanted to talk about that today. But like when did you first realize, okay, it looks like I see you joining on the computer. So looks like it booted up finally. So I'll just let you on there. And then, yeah, so I guess my question for you is, so you kind of first realized that like this could be really powerful for me and for my clients, that it's really convenient and allows me to serve more than just one person at a time. What's kind of like, I guess, the overall strategy? So maybe we can kind of paint a big like a vision picture for people, like, okay, hey, this is kind of why you'd use it. We can dive into that, and then we can go into maybe some of the struggles and some of the other points of like how do you actually do it. So I'll let you get switched over real quick and then all right, let's see.
Okay, did the old switcheroo. I apologize.
Cool.
I was so trying to I was like, oh, it's gonna be smooth.
That's great.
But yeah,
so what's kind of the overall strategy of like using a workshop?
Absolutely. So I think that when you use workshops, there are a few things that you need to consider even before you start. First and foremost, who are you doing these workshops for? Audience is everything, because you can speak to a whole bunch of people that, it's like all of it may fall on deaf ears, right? So who is the audience that you're really catering to when you're doing these workshops? That's one. Once you determine the audience that you're working with, now we've got to find the topic. What is it that speaks to this group of people? What is it that they want to know? And it could be one thing, one major thing, or it could be, an arena of things. For example, if we're talking to pregnant women, right? Pregnancy lasts 10 months and there's a plethora of things that you can speak about, right? But at least this is my audience. This is who I'm speaking to. So you really need to hone in on that title, make it catchy, right? Draw them in. And then with the workshop, as you go through the content, I always say, think of the things that are pertinent to them. You don't want a workshop to be overbearing. It shouldn't be an overwhelming amount of information. I usually keep my workshops typically to anywhere between like 30 and 55 minutes, and that includes Q&A. If they're shorter, maybe not as much Q&A, maybe just more content. If they're closer to an hour, then probably 45 minutes of content, about 15 minutes of Q&A, so we can get some interaction going. If they're longer than that, it's usually an interactive where we've already got a workbook and we're going through things together. We're working through things together, issues that they may have, and it's constant feedback. And I think that those are really good, because the other thing about that is now they get to learn from other people, because oftentimes people think, oh my God, I'm the only one this is happening to. And so I think that kind of community effect is phenomenal. When we talk about, the structure of the workshop, like I said, you want a really amazing, catchy title. You want to make sure that the content is really geared towards what it is they want, kind of towards that title, but not too much. Really, really kind of settle on 3 to 5 points that kind of hit home your message. and leave some time to interact with them so that they can ask some questions. Most importantly, there must be some sort of call to action. Call to action doesn't necessarily mean them purchasing a product or them scheduling a session, but it could be something else. It could be maybe you have already have an online program, around this content that you want to direct them to. Maybe you already have some other free information, right? Maybe these are all new people that you've brought in and you kind of just want them to know more about you, what you do, who you are, how you can help them. And you kind of direct them to that level of content because maybe they didn't know. So maybe they just kind of found you, randomly, found your workshop randomly online. And so now you kind of want to bring them into your community. And then thirdly, another really good call to action is the community. So create a community for these people now, whereby you can kind of bring them together because they're already interested, right? They're interested in what you have to say. They're interested in that specific topic, right? And so you want to bring them in because chances are they want to know more. That's not the end for them. Likely it's like, oh, okay. So I know there's more to this, and they're going to ask questions, and you want to give them a way to kind of get that feedback. So I think that that's really, really good. And that's the strategy that I've used. There are several other people that use different strategies. Again, they may do paid workshops, right? So you have the option of doing free workshops and paid workshops. A lot of it depends on your end goal. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to achieve with this? You could do a free workshop where you're trying to build a community, engage people, get people to know who you are, or direct them to other things, other content that you have, whether free or paid. Or you may do a paid workshop where it's more specific, it's more dialed in, maybe more interactive, and then you're giving them a little bit more. And oftentimes, sometimes those can be an hour as well, but more often than not, you might find those are the ones that might go a little bit longer. So even up to 2 hours.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's really great information there. And it sounds like, it's worked really well for you. And like you mentioned, I think it's good to bring up that like everything, people do it different ways. And so that's what's really good about this is that, everyone here in the challenge, we can figure out, okay, this is like how I might use a workshop. And I think your point about being paid versus free is a really good one too. And it really comes down to like your end goal, like you mentioned. That's something that part of my framework is the vision. Starts with the vision pretty much with anything you ever do, because it's like, we need to know like, well, what's the goal in the end? And how do I know if this is going to be successful and what's the whole point of it? And so I think that's really good advice to figure out, okay, what's the goal here? And then it's a lot easier to then craft, your workshop or whatever you're doing as part of that. And part of the, the reason for this challenge is for everyone here to be like, okay, yeah, is it workshops? Is it paid workshops? Or is it, something else? And so I think that's what's really good is there's so many different options of ways to do this, to make an impact online. And so that's sweet. Let's talk a little bit about like some of the initial struggles. So when you first like did a challenge or did a workshop, what were some of those initial struggles that like took a little bit of time to understand how to overcome? And then we can dive into more of like the how-to and stuff like that, which I think you did some of that. But like, what were some of those initial struggles that you had?
So for me, it was, one in particular was just kind of finding that flow. How do I want this workshop to flow? And again, everyone, you could listen to several different workshops. A lot of people have their own signature kind of, when you hear them give a workshop or a presentation, it's pretty much consistent, right? You've got to have your own secret sauce. They're not trying to, engage with somebody else. They're engaging with you. And so it was just kind of getting, a flow going for the workshops that I was comfortable, because eventually it was, I could rattle them off a lot quicker. It might be a different topic, slightly different content, but the format would definitely be the same. I think the other thing was, just initially, who do I want to speak to? I treat pelvic health, men and women, adults and children, right? And so it's like, oh man, It's a big population. It might not seem like a lot because, oh, it's just pelvic health. But when you factor in that, adults and kids are going to have, their own issues. Men and women are going to have their own issues. Who do I want to speak to? And I've done workshops for either. And, it's just kind of, oh, well, should I just focus on this or should I just focus on this? And so one of the things that I decided to do was, and kind of going along with some other content that I have, is let's just do themes. So if all the content is focusing on this month, and we decide to do a workshop, it's going right along with that, right? So it kind of brings home everything they've already been engaging with. And if the next month we've gone on to something else, then we focus the workshop on that, because again, then it brings home all of that content that they would have tuned into. And so that got a little bit easier. So it's not like, oh my God, I've got to think about, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, this is so difficult. No, now it's, okay, this is what our focus has been. And let's just make it continuous with that. Makes it so much easier because essentially you've already got all the information there anyway. And you would have already kind of captivated, people, viewers. You would have already curated an audience because now they've been feeding into that information. The other thing is do you want to do a paid workshop? Do you want to advertise for your workshop? Do you want it organic? Right? So a lot of people are like, well, how do I get people to sign up for my workshop? And again, it really comes down to who is the workshop for and what is the goal of the workshop. You can advertise, you can run a Facebook ad, you can do all these things. Again, at the end of the day, you have to figure out what that call to action is. So if you're trying to build a community, sure, you can do either or, right? Because now as you do, let's say you did a paid ad, you now brought all those people in, presumably to your community. But you can easily do that for free. And it really just depends on what does your community look like already? What does the audience that you're speaking to look like? What do they look like already? Do you need the extra boost with kind of the paid marketing? Or can you facilitate it with some organic marketing? How long have you been pushing it? So you might have to push it a little bit longer so that it gets more visibility. And you might not be able to just whip up something in 2 days and say, hey, having a workshop, come join me, right? And expect like 100 people. You might have to say, okay, let's do this over a span of 2 weeks, kind of, keep feeding it to people so that they're aware. And so you kind of come up with different strategies that work for you where you're at, allowing you to test the waters and allowing you to go ahead and work towards whatever your ultimate goal is, whether it's getting paid clients, building a community, all these different things.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool. And to me, when you're talking, it just reminded me of like riding a bike. Like riding a bike at first, it's so hard. You have to figure out how to balance and figure out how to not go too fast or too slow or things like that. But once you kind of get that initial, you start to figure that out, then you can start focus on other things. And so, it's important for, our audience just to know that hey, pick what you're going to do and then really dive into it, because it gets easier as you as you go forward. So I think that's great information there. As far as, I was curious to ask you about well, actually real quick, just for the audience, what are some of the reasons you've never tried this strategy before? If you haven't tried a workshop, what's kind of held you back? And if you have done it, why do you like them? I'd love to hear. So keep those coming. And then, so we talked about the initial struggles. We kind of talked about what's the overall goal and understanding that first. And so maybe let's dive a little bit more into your specific strategy. So you kind of talked about understanding your audience, making sure you have a good headline, which is totally true. I mentioned earlier that 80% of people, they just see the headline basically. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes we're oh, we got to write all this stuff, but it's if you just focus on that one thing, that's really the most important piece. But yeah, so what could you help us with as far as other parts of your strategy, as far as how to go about doing this?
So definitely want a nice and catchy title, right? It's got to be something that they're interested in. So if you've got a particular audience, you would have known a few of the things that they might have been struggling with, a few of the things that they want to know about. You take one of those things and you flip it into a nice creative title. Boom, that's the title for your workshop. When you start the workshop, you kind of want to give them a preview. So they come into the workshop, you want to give them a preview of the workshop. What are we doing this workshop for? who is this workshop for? That kind of stuff. And then go on to introduce yourself. Who are you? Right? Why are you giving this workshop? Why are you the authority on this? Right? So give them a little bit about you and then jump into the content. Again, like I said, I try to keep it short. Depending on the length of time, you'll be surprised. Most people think, oh my God, I've got to have like all this stuff. But you want it to flow well and you want it to be nice and cohesive. You don't want to jump all over the place. So you might give a little bit of a background on whatever your topic is. You know, if we're talking pelvic health, what that pelvic health issue is, what it looks like, what some of their symptoms might look like, whatever the case may be. And if it's, you know, strategies to address that, then we go in to give them like 3 good strategies, 3 nice and strong things, because at the end of the day, they need to have something they can take away. If they don't have anything they can take away, then what's the point? And then that only kind of makes your call to action weaker because you haven't really given them anything. So you want to give them something, you know, again, you've given them some content, you've given them some information. Now they're like, oh yeah, that's me, right? Oh my God, you said that like if I had a baby, like, you know, this whole pelvic girdle pain might be a thing. Oh my God, I had no idea. So that's what's hurting me, you know? So now you've kind of drawn them in. And now you want to say, hey, so if you're dealing with this, now we've put a name to what you're dealing with. Let's talk about how to address it. Let's talk about things, ways to make you comfortable. And you give them like 3 good, strong tips. The reason why I say 3, you don't want to be too long-winded. You can always do a part 2. Just know you can always do a part 2. If the audience loves it, you can always do a continuation, but you don't want to get too long-winded. And again, depending on your time, how long you talk, how fast you speak, all these different things, you know, you'll be surprised how quickly 40 minutes goes by. And you're like, oh crap. You know, and you want to still give them time to engage a little bit. There should always be room for engagement, pausing, making sure that you're interacting with people. Don't just talk at people. They can listen to a podcast for that. But when your audience comes on, engage them. Who are they? Where are they? Hey, what do you do? So all of you guys are coming in here. You're coming in for this workshop, you know, and just kind of, you know, give them some information. Also have some personality. Again, they can listen to a podcast, right? If they just want somebody to talk at them. So give them some personality, right? Because they're here for you. They're not here for somebody else. They're here for you. You know, they could have taken this from anybody, but they're taking it from you. So give them you. And ultimately, again, once you finish giving them the content, interact with them, ask them if they have any questions. Make sure that you always give your contact information for a way for them to follow up and have a strong call to action. What is your call to action going to be? Is it going to be for them to be a part of a community? Is it going to be for them to schedule something with you, whether free or paid? Is it going to be for them to, you know, as this, you know, for this to be a segue to other content that you already have? You know, kind of plan that out even beforehand so that it just runs very smoothly. So you want to make sure, okay, if I've got them, you know, if I'm going to direct them to a community, I've got all my links set up. You know, if it's a product, I've got all my links set up, whatever have you, and it just kind of runs smoothly into that.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. And it's funny that you mentioned, yeah, like ask them questions. And like I've written down like hey, like I was going to ask everyone too right now, like what questions do you have around this, like on how you do this? So put that in the chat. But yeah, I think that's really awesome. And I think that it's important to, especially what you're saying, like of understanding what that call to action is and making sure, because I remember I did my first challenge and I didn't really have that figured out. I was kind of like, okay, I'm just like doing this challenge, but like didn't quite understand the strategy. And so then I like mid challenge was like, oh, this is what I can, you know, kind of offer to people. But like, it's just having that ahead of time is really important. And just the thing I would say too, because I know for me, it's been a struggle sometimes too, is like to just be confident in that. And like, okay, this is what I decided to do. And I'm just going to talk about it. Cause sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know if people want to schedule, or I don't know if, but like, again, they're here, they showed up, they're here because
Mhm.
of you. And so just, be strong about that. And that does make a difference, because when people know that, like, if you're confident about it, then people will, respond to that too. So,
Yeah.
which is important. So let's talk a little bit about like how this has changed your business. Like what's, kind of before and after of like, I started doing this and now it's like, hey, this has actually really made a difference for me.
I absolutely love workshops for the mere fact that it really is a great depiction of the one to many. So typically, as a clinician, you see people one on one. Occasionally, you might see people in group, but they're not a whole heck of a lot of people who are doing group anything. And even if it's a group, you're not seeing like 20 people in a group, right? Most of the time, it might be a smaller group. The beauty of workshops is you get to get that message out to multiple people. And it could be, 20, 30, 100. I've done workshops where there's been over 200 people in the workshop. I've done workshops where there might have been five. And again, it depends on the topic. It depends on when you're hosting it, time of day, things like that. But ultimately, and also if there's a playback, is there going to be an opportunity for somebody who missed it maybe to view it later? But there's it, the beauty of workshops is now I get to speak to many people at one time. So I sit here during this designated time and I have the ability to reach a ton of people. Whereas, traditionally it would have been one to one, one to one. And it's beautiful because now you're reaching more people. It's a positive impact on your business because, again, depending on that call to action, you've either now brought people into a community if you have a group, you've brought people towards your content, you've brought people closer to scheduling with you, or you've gotten people to schedule with you as a result of this. So you may be able to do a workshop and get 3 new, 4 new, 5 new evals out of that, if not more, right? How much is that worth to you? So you might have done a free workshop and let's say you got 5 evals. How much is one patient worth to you in your practice? That's huge. And the return on investment basically would be great, especially if it was a free workshop, because now you've gotten to really make an impact on these people. So you really want to think about it in the scope of your business as a tool. Is it the only tool that you can utilize? Certainly not. But again, based on the people you serve and the things that they crave to know, it's a really great way to get that information out there, to get your message to new people, to get your message, to get things across to people who might have even been in your community but hadn't heard of this, right? Whatever this may be, whatever topic area it might have been. But it's really a great way to get your message out to new and more people.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really really cool. And the cool thing about using a workshop like this would be that you can almost allow people to kind of choose to work with you, kind of say like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
look, I'm here and I want to do this, right? Rather than always feeling like you're chasing and like trying to connect to people. And I think the other great point that you bring up too is the fact that doing this, a couple times and then understanding like how it's working and things, and then understanding, okay, if I do it and then like I get, 5 new customers or whatever that is, then that allows you to then look at maybe potentially doing ads, right? If you're like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
want to scale this up, but now I know like the show up rate and I know some of these different things, rather
Yeah.
than sometimes, starting with like paid marketing, like is a little bit tricky because, you go and then, maybe you do get people show up, but it's not the right person or, whatever, but then, knowing those numbers can really help that as well. So that's awesome. Glad that it's been so good for you. And one of the things I wanted to ask the audience too is, how do you feel like this would change your business? If you can envision doing this on a regular basis and knowing that like, hey, you have these people showing up, like how would that change your business? Because it certainly has changed Dr. J's and kids changed all of ours. So what would you say are some of like what would you say like the best first steps for somebody that's like they've never done this before? Like you've mapped out kind of what you do, but like what would you say to like encourage them like, hey, you can do this, and then like
Mhm.
where would you recommend them starting to kind of get going with it?
The biggest starting point with anybody is figure out who you want to speak to. I think for a lot of people, that's the part. They're like, I want to do a workshop on this. Okay, who's it for? And they're like, and then they pause. Figure out who you want to speak to. Create your workshop, your messaging around that. The hardest thing is to know who you're speaking, because it's easy. If I know I'm speaking to, let's say, pregnant women, I know the issues they have. If I'm speaking to people on sexual dysfunction, I know the issues they have. If I'm speaking to athletes with regards to leaking, I know the issues that they have. So figure out who you want to speak to, and then curate your content around that. I think that that's the biggest thing. And then, you know, the hardest thing to do is start. Just start, right? I think another really amazing thing that people underutilize is collaboration. One of the things that you can do, whether, it's the same as if you're doing an in-person workshop, right? You might say, hey, let me go to this gym and let me see if I can do a workshop for their clientele, because that's my audience and maybe it will be great, right? And so maybe you can get like 30 people to attend this workshop. Well, it's no different online. You can collaborate with people just the same way. You can still reach out to the gym and say, hey, I know you've been working with your customers online due to, COVID or whatever have you, or maybe because you found that this is something that they truly enjoy. I'd love to tag team with you and give your audience, give your people this information, because I think it'd be really helpful to them. Start building relationships and start working on collaborations, because now you have access to other people who would benefit from your message.
Yeah, so good. I love that. And I'm glad you bring that up too, because that's something that I wasn't sure how that would work with workshops, but it's good to know that you could do that too, because in some of my I guess I love just events in general. It's like, okay, summits and challenges and summit challenges, which we're doing right now, live events and things, and workshops and webinars. And one of the things that I recommend for people, it's like, hey, if you want to get in front of more people, you don't have an audience and you don't want to be running ads for that, then doing like a summit or a summit challenge is a great way to do that. But it sounds like as well that there's a workshop version of that too, where you can do kind of a summit in a sense, but where you can have other people help you get people there and stuff like that, which is really a powerful thing too. And so definitely something to look at, because when you can bring together other amazing businesses or speakers and things like that, then that can really help as well to be able to help get people there. So appreciate you saying that. I think that's awesome. And we had a comment in here with that this would change the business by connecting with new clients, introducing myself in a new community, and promoting my book. So that's super awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
And definitely a great way to be able to do that. And that's one thing I love about too, just events in general, is like it's a great way to like provide value up front. And again, they can be paid. Even that can still be valuable how you're doing that. But I think it's a really powerful thing. And so, well, I think I've just got one more question for you. So, and that is like, what would be one piece of advice to our challengers? And maybe it's just get started, like you talked about just a minute ago, but like, is there one thing that you could say to them, like about, even if it's not even workshops, but like, what's the one thing that you'd want to give away to our audience?
Something that was shared with me a few years ago: imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. Sometimes you just have to start. You're not going to, the beautiful thing about trying and presumably failing, because people assume that just because it didn't meet their expectations, that it was a complete and total failure. But the beautiful thing about that is now you have some data to work with. Now you have some metrics to work with. So it's not a total failure. Now okay, this worked or this didn't work. And you can look at why it did or didn't, and you can use that information to move forward and do something differently, right? But if you don't do anything, then you have nothing. You have nothing to work with, right? And I think as when we talk about business owners and we talk about trying these things that can really jumpstart their businesses, you want to try something. You got to do something. Right? You just got to start. And it may seem intimidating, like, oh my God, I've never done this. I don't like speaking to these people. If you're a clinician, you do it every day. You already speak to them every day, right? No different. You're in the comfort of your home, you're doing this workshop, you're in your space, maybe put on some background music, get your personality going, and just do it. Just do it. Just go for it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I wrote that down, put it in the chat for everybody because it's an amazing quote. But yeah, it is like sometimes so hard to to do it, but like once you do, you realize that like you can do it again, right? And like you said, like you could spend years, just like crafting this perfect thing, and then doing it finally. But then again, like you mentioned, the data that you get back is super important, because like you try this and you think this headline's so good, and then you do it and it's like people are confused. Like I've done that before. I originally was gonna I was gonna do some things on like messages on fire and stuff like that. But then I did this little like workshop on it, and all these people came on and like, so wait, what is that exactly? Is that my story? Like, I don't know what a message on fire is. And so I was so glad, because I was gonna like use this like going forward, like for my events. And so I was like, I'm just so glad that like I messed up essentially, right? Messed up. But now I knew like, okay, perfect. Now I know this is not what I want to use. And it was a really quick way to be able to learn that. And so yeah, I want to just echo what you said, and just everyone should just go for it, because we can do it. And so what I wanted to do is just finally just say, hey, once again, thank you so much, Dr. J, for coming on here. Really appreciate you and your time. And you've dropped some awesome quotes and just some awesome strategy here for everyone to be able to do this. And I encourage everyone to, figure out, like fill out your homework. There's just a couple questions there, so it shouldn't take you too long. But just to really think through this and say, hey, like, how do I see workshops working in my business? How have I maybe done them before? How can I make them better? But then to, again, for the goal of this week is to see some different strategies that you can do, to figure out, hey, is this the one that I really want to focus on or not? Because just like we heard, imperfect action is really important. So that's, by the end of this challenge, I just hope that you have that one strategy, like, okay, I'm gonna do a workshop, and taking that, or maybe it's something else, but at least and that's why I think this will be a great way this week for you to be able to do that. And so the other thing that I said we would be doing is doing a giveaway real quick. So I'm going to see, let's see if I don't know that I'm actually totally set up to that. So I will go live a little bit later today, and we'll do, a reminder to watch the replay, and then do the giveaway too. So anyways, I think that's pretty much it. So thank you again, Dr. J, for coming on here. And I'm sure that, we'll get a lot more people watching the replays and things too, to just say thank you to do. So thanks again for being on here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.